Welcome to the check-in, a show where a couple of friends hang out on their lunch break and talk about life under increasing fascism. Danielle, as I was saying before we started, it's so good to see you. There is so much going on. I am so glad that we're here to not just make sense of it. Isn't necessarily the right phrase, but it's the first thing that comes to the mind because nothing makes sense right now. But I think trying to approach that with you, I'm very appreciative of it. How are you doing, my friend?
I was just saying, I am okay. Um, I think that I am in a space today or this week where I'm trying to concentrate and hold what I can.
Yeah.
And this living inside of fascism is constantly pushing you to figure out how to access joy when everything around you is collapsing
Yeah.
and how to focus on what you can control, what you can do, and figure out what your role is, right? And then let what isn't go because there's no reason to hold it. And I'm reading this book. People always ask me like what I do to decompress and like what shows do you binge watch and like blah blah. I'm not like a binge watch show type of person. I read. And I'm reading this fiction book called Death of an Author and by Nnedi Okorafor. And in the book, the the writer, the author, her father dies. And there's a scene where she is at the wake and like her siblings are losing it, her mother is losing it and she's about to lose it. And her partner comes in and says to her, "You need to be in this moment at your father's wake in the way that you are a writer. You need to observe and not take on, right? In order to make it through this really hard, gut wrenching moment, you need to put yourself in the seat of the observer and report on in your mind what is happening as opposed to feeling every aspect of what is happening." And I thought that that breakdown in this book for me was so resonant because I'm like, as writers, as commentators, right? It is important in this moment for us to be able to report on and analyze what is happening. And it's really difficult to do it when you feel the weight of what it is that you are discussing, right? Like I can remember that when I made my foray into media, it was on the heels of talking about marriage equality, talking about LGBTQ equality. It's really hard to advocate for a community that you're in and not feel that the discrimination that's happening nationwide isn't being directly pointed at you and your person. So I feel like in this moment, in this profession, in this space, that it is important to remind myself to observe and to not absorb, to be able to report on and have and create some necessary distance between what I am seeing and what I am feeling, because I can't control all of the things that I'm seeing. So I need to also not absorb all of the things that I'm seeing. So that's where I am right now as all of these headlines kind of swirl around us.
Man, I am so glad that you put it that way because I think we're actually drilling down on some. It's funny. Like as a former educator, I think about scaffolding of knowledge.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like
Yeah.
how much you and I have been talking about, like, and I think it's because of the way that we communicate. We have been scaffolding up on things. So today, we're talking about like, oh hey, you've completed the 101. It's time we move up to the 200 level thing because there's
Welcome everyone to your graduation.
welcome. Hey, by the way, you still have so many semesters left. It's September of the first year of this.
Right.
So I want to start because there are elements of what you just talked about, which is like really, really hard stuff that we need to talk about. And I want to begin with this. Last week when I talked to you, I told you it's so strange, like the way we episode this up. I said I was struggling with some stuff. I had a sink full of dishes that I needed to do.
Mhm.
I was feeling it. I needed to read. I needed to do that stuff. Hours after we were done, I reached a point of shutdown. And for people who don't know what
Mm.
that is basically the evolutionary mind is like, this is too much and we give up. Basically, we're ready for death, right?
Mm.
Like when you crawl into bed, you're just like, I can't even run from this anymore. I
Yep.
can't fight this anymore. I'm done. I'm done. I'm exhausted. I can't do it. And eventually, and it was rough. But Danielle, what did I ended up saying to myself? I can't stay like this. I need to go wash the dishes.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't want to. I feel terrible. I'm shut down. I need to go do the dishes. And guess what I did? I went, I unloaded the dishwasher, I loaded up the dishwasher, I washed what I needed to do. It got me out of shutdown to the point where I could function, right? As opposed to like in the past when I didn't know about this stuff and when I wasn't taking care of myself, depression would take over for
Yeah.
weeks or months. I lost years of my life to depression.
Mm.
And there is something to this based on what you just said. And I sort of mentioned it and I'll weave it throughout this. We're entering into a new period right now in this thing. What we saw from the Kirk Memorial and what we saw this morning from like what happened with the ICE detention shooting, how they're lying about it, how they're lying about autism. And by the way, like as an autistic person, I'm pissed. I'm pissed, right? Like I'm so angry about this. And there's something about this that you and I have spent the majority of our conversations talking about how to take care of ourselves emotionally.
Yep.
We have talked about how much of this is about staying away from dissociating, how much of this is about staying present, how much of it is about replenishing ourselves. The things that we do that have hurt our lives, that have hurt others, that have hurt the world, those are coping mechanisms that we've developed to go through really hard times,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
it happens often unconsciously. Sometimes we have to use those coping mechanisms.
Mhm.
Sometimes we have to say, "Oh, what's going on right now?" Because what you just explained about that funeral, right? Or even what's happening now, you can at times sort of strategically dissociate away from it.
Yes.
And you can say, okay, right now, I'm going to go through this overwhelming situation for a little bit, just for a little bit today, tomorrow, this moment, whether it's a funeral or a traumatic event that you got to deal with. You have the ability to say, I'm going to look at this as an observer. I like this isn't about me. This isn't going to go into me. It's not going to change me. And by doing that, you are making a choice. But what's important here is the choice,
Yep.
right?
Yes. The
Right.
conscious choice. Yeah.
Because if we are constantly dissociating and we are just going through life on autopilot, we're giving up our life.
Right.
And we're hurting ourselves, we're hurting hurting others, we're hurting society if we just choose to do that, if we just choose to go under and live there. But at moments and this is a hard thing as a person who has had mental health struggles
Mhm.
and for
Mhm.
who loves people who have mental health struggles and understands it and has researched. Are these things natural? Yes. Are they caused by trauma? Yes. But we also gain agency by making choices,
Mhm.
by
Mhm.
making choices about how we engage with it. And at times that's going to be opposite action. It's going to be doing the dishes when we feel like we can't do anything. At times it's going to say, no, I need to back away from this for just a moment in order to replenish myself, in order to continue the fight. And these things, they work in concert, but this is next level shit that we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that the key point here about exactly what you lifted up with regard to disassociation is the consciousness around it. Right? We are being called to be really conscious about how we are feeling, what we are taking on, what we need to offload, what we need to ask for help, right? When we are feeling like we want to curl up in the bed and not get up for days or weeks or months at a time, when you're feeling as if, you know what, I thought that I had my head above water, but now I feel like I'm drowning, right?
Yep.
This time is calling for us to be incredibly connected and incredibly grounded to the point that you can make the conscious decisions of when I need to absorb something and when I need to just observe it, on when I need to speak out on said thing and when I need to just kind of see how things play out, right? I think that to what you had said before we had started and now is that we are in a different phase,
Yes.
right? We are in a phase where, one, the president of the United States is outwardly threatening networks, individuals, his own attorney general to do his bidding, to prosecute his foes, that like there is no veil anymore.
He is
It is,
literally
it
out of his
is,
fucking
it
mind.
is, yeah, it is naked, unabashed truth that Donald Trump is offering us. There's no way to nuance yourself out of this, right? And so, that being said, we know what these kinds of regimes do. Well, at least you and I do, right? You are studied in this. This next phase is going to be the ultimate, to me, power grab, which is that I can now kill and do whatever it is that I want. So everything up to this point, Jared, I've said has been the Jurassic Park phase, where you're continuing to just test the fences, see how far you can go, see how much the public is paying attention, see how riled up they're going to be, see if there's any actual pushback, right? And so with the Kimmel example, you saw that the public, even his own supposed followers, were like, "You're taking this First Amendment bit a little bit too far,
Yep.
right? And like, we're not going to stand with you on this." And I was actually shocked that
Me.
there were right wing people whose clips I was playing on my own show because I'm like, has hell frozen over?
Ted
The-
Cruz.
right? Ted Cruz. Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, right? Like there were a number of these very influential alt-right figures that were like saying outwardly, you can't do this. With this is the First Amendment. This is why we get to do what it is that we do, even though I call what they do fear mongering and hate speech, right? They still have to a certain extent the freedom to do that, right? But what is happening with the fact that there are 1,200 human beings that are missing? And I just want to tell people real quick, because I said this last night, because it is so wildly underreported right now, Jared. When I went to go Google this, I found an article at Miami Herald and Esquire and The Guardian.
Yep.
None of our major networks have yet to cover the fact that, folks, Ron DeSantis's quote unquote alligator Alcatraz had 1,800 detainees there. 1,200 of them are missing. There is no record. There was no fucking Google Excel sheet. There are no names, no ages, no contact information, no lawyers, no nothing. 1,200 human beings are missing that were in the care of the government of these United States. And no one is reporting on it. Now we have a shooting that has taken place where one person is dead and there are two people that have now been transferred to hospital with gunshot wounds. This administration can't be trusted to tell you about Tylenol. You think that they're going to tell you where 1,200 people are? You think that they're going to tell you what exactly is happening in terms of gunfires and shots and people that have died in ICE custody? Because the number that I hear right now about people who have died in ICE custody is like in the teens. And I'm like, you're fucking lying.
Yep.
Like you are lying.
Yeah.
Right? So the phase that we are in is the sociopathic murderous phase,
Yes.
where they are going to dare, and Pete Hegseth said, you sign this pledge or I'm pulling your credentials. Because if you report on the truth, you alert the people to the fact that we are sociopathic murderers, then I'm going to make sure you don't have a job anymore. So what I think is really important, Jared, is that Jimmy Kimmel used his platform yesterday to not only thank folks for what they did for him, but what they did for their defense of the First Amendment and to alert them to the fact that we have entered into a different phase of this shit. And that, as Gavin Newsom said, if you do not wake up right now, he is telling you, Pritzker is telling you, and you and I have been saying this, we're not having midterms. We're not having a presidential election. And anything that we do have will be akin to what Turkey and Iran has. So I think that people need to acknowledge the phases that we are in.
Yep.
They need to understand their role and the responsibility that they have as both observers, right, and activists in this moment. But that we can no longer, for those that, again, thought that they could ride, I did it the first 4 years of Trump, I can just ride this out. I think that we are seeing day in and day out that no, you can't. And if they can disappear 1,200 men, and I'm saying disappeared, they can do that to you.
100% right. And there are so many different threads you just hit on, and it's why you're one of the absolute best in the game. And I want to hit on all of them very, very quickly. So first things first, when we're talking about, and I want to say, because for people who've been tuning into this, I talked about this, I want to say it was like a month ago when the Epstein stuff was like really going. And I said, these things happen in waves.
Yeah.
There's a moment where in authoritarianism, the authoritarian seems very, very vulnerable. Things are maybe a little bit quiet. You feel some momentum. And then I told people there will be another moment where the wave recedes and all of a sudden they get very, very aggressive. And I don't say that just because I've studied history. It's because I've been around abusive people. That's how these things work. And we all know this because we've all been around somebody who at some point or another, a switch flipped and they went into a different direction. And they got more aggressive and more violent and more desperate. And you see how these things play out. So that's where we are right now. And if you know that, you can sort of gird yourself against it, right? And you can understand what's coming and you can understand how to sort of ride these things out. So let's talk about writing these things out.
Yep.
Things first. Like one of the things I tried to talk about this in my most recent article, and it's hard to talk about because it's so strange. We are now living in a time, and I was waiting on this for them to realize that they could just fucking lie about everything. That there were no consequences about it. And once you discover you can lie about things, you can manufacture things, and it took a while, like they've lied for a long time.
Yep.
They didn't realize that they could use the state apparatus to do it. That's why the Tylenol thing was so fucked up. Is because they just made something up from complete whole cloth and then went with it and basically dared people to do anything about it, right? So they've now entered in this phase where they know that they can lie to us constantly and that they can weaponize the lying. For the record, I don't trust at all anything that comes out of the FBI when it comes to any of these things.
Anything.
And by the way, it was a projection for years when they did all these conspiracy theories, false flags, doctoring evidence. They were just telling you what they would do if they had power. So we can't trust any of that. And you know what happens, Danielle, when you spend enough time around a pathological liar? It isn't just that you realize that you're being lied to. Eventually, over time, your body changes. Your mind changes. And you know what happens? You start thinking, maybe I don't deserve the truth. Maybe the way that I'm being treated is actually about me. It shows something about my lack of worth. Right? It's the same way with violence and abuse. And people say, why do people stay in these situations? Because eventually you adapt to it. And there's a term that people need to become familiar with. And I it's terrible right now. I read this book a couple of years ago. I forget the author of it. It's called soul murder. And if you actually study people who have lived in terribly abusive environments, and I know sometimes it helps for people to have pop culture references. Think about Game of Thrones, the character of Reek, the character that was constantly tortured and abused, and eventually the will broke down. Soul murder is where, as these things are taking place, it breaks a person down. It starts to make them feel as if they have deserved the way that they've been treated. So on one hand, as these things are happening, Danielle, there's an anger that drives us. Like I'm pissed.
Yeah.
Like I'm really pissed about what's happening right now. Anger is not an infinite energy source.
No.
It actually burns up your energy very, very quick. It can get you out of other stages of things, but it's like shoveling coal into like a locomotive fire. It's just shoveling all of the coal in there, and it can burn you up and wear you out. At times, you have to be aware that you are not immune to what's going on. You're not immune to what's happening in the media. You're not immune in what's happening with our politics. Like, this stuff gets to you even if you think that you are strong enough for it. And because I trust you and because we have these conversations and we don't have to get into it, you and I exist in a very specific ecosystem.
Mhm.
We have a very small group of people
Mhm.
that have all been calling this like it is for the past 10 years
Yes.
and have been saying that this is a problem. That's fair, correct? It is a
Yep.
small little fraternity sorority.
Yep.
It takes a toll on people.
Yep.
Seen it. We don't have to talk about the people or whatever. You see the people, it burns them out. It changes them. Some of them become self-obsessed. Some of them become like very, very focused and aren't able to do certain things. You have to be able, like in our jobs, because people are turning to us to understand what's going on and hear where things are going. For us, it is a certain type of self-care that we have to engage in.
Mhm.
Specifically, and I are talking about like these coping mechanisms and how we make them work. For the people on the other side of it, they have to take care of themselves too.
Mhm.
And you have to realize that this takes a toll, that idea of soul murder, the idea that like all of these things that are happening and all of the ways that this fascist regime is treating us. And by the way, you don't get 1,200 people disappeared and possibly killed. You don't get shootings at an ICE detention center that targets, immigrants. You don't get that without dehumanization. That's the entire point of this, is to dehumanize and take away human dignity and getting us to the point where we say, "Oh, this is the world that we live in. I guess that's how it is."
Yep.
And we have to maintain ourselves and we have to anchor ourselves to say, "No, humans have dignity. People should be treated not just better than this, better than they used to be treated." And that is one of the biggest balancing acts that has ever been asked of us. And what we're discussing right now is how to take what we've been talking about and what people have been feeling and put it into an operational standpoint. How do you live in this environment? And the answer is you have to be aware and you have to make conscious choices. And they make it so hard to make those choices.
Because when you look at all of this, right, what is happening in this country, what is happening in Gaza,
Yeah.
right? What just happened this past week in Italy, and the national strike that the country has undergone in protests against what is happening in Gaza, right? Depravity, genocidal actions,
Yeah.
all of a sudden become normalized. We are seeing every single, and that's what you're talking about, the soul murder and the erosion of our values and our morality and our ability to conjure empathy. Because when you're continually scrolling through disaster, through murder, through death, through starvation, right? You become desensitized to it. It's the same way that the day that Charlie Kirk is murdered, there's a school shooting and no one has talked about that school shooting.
No.
And since he's been killed, there have been shootings,
Yep.
right? But because we've gotten to a place, well, I guess if it's not 10 or more children that are dead in their classroom, I guess if it's not, if they didn't use two machine guns, like we're like, it's not that bad. Because we have been experiencing this type of erosion for like 30 years now when it comes to mass shootings and school shootings and gun violence,
Yep.
right? And similarly, when people are like, oh my God, I can't believe that it's only September. Donald Trump has only been president since January. And I'm like, it hasn't just been
No.
8 or 9 months. It's been 10 years,
There's
right? And 5 of those years are kind of in a weird COVID time capsule black hole.
total denial. 5 years of denial about a problem that still existed. Yeah.
Right. So it's like literally, I mean, to the point where the rapture, Jared, was trending yesterday. For the
And you know
love of
why they
fucking
wanted to
God.
go? They wanted to go.
Yeah.
They
It
wanted
was
to
like,
work.
hey, take
Yes.
me.
Yes.
Right? Like I said, I on Blue Sky said, I woke up late. Did I miss it? Right? Like, did I miss the rapture? I woke up late. Did,
Yep.
somebody send something? Like, I just feel, and I feel like, people try right now to either they are not providing themselves with the level of grace that they do for the amount of crazy that they feel. And I want us all to realize that, like, not only are we living through the most insane timeline, but we're being forced to work and pretend that all of it is normal. So that if you're at your desk, if you're in your cubicle and you're like in tears while you're filling out the fucking TPS report, folks are like, "Oh, what's wrong with Bob? What's wrong with Danielle?" Like, I don't see the big you don't see the big deal. Like, everything around us, the walls are closing in and everyone is pretending like all is okay. And so that to me is the reason why this level of consciousness that we're being called into is so important. Because if you are not grounded, if you are not 10 toes down right now, if you are not rooted, this tornado, this tsunami of absolute mayhem and fuckery will suck you right up, and you won't know how to find your way out.
And by the way, and you're exactly right. And I think we also need to make it clear, you're not always going to be grounded.
No.
Even under the best circumstances, healing is not a straight line. You are not like there's no pitching a perfect game here. You are not going to be at 100% all the time. You can't do that even under the best of circumstances. If we had a utopia, like if we actually make the better world that you and I have been advocating for, you're still going to struggle. There are still going to be moments in which you're not going to have it. It makes it worse that we have precarity. It makes it worse that you have to deal with all this fascistic abuse and bullshit. You are never going to get there. And what that other part of it, we're talking about these advanced level things, you have to have like grace for yourself.
Yes.
You have to be like, oh, I don't have it today. Oh, this shit, it's too much. I can't do it today, which goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning. Nobody, you brought up like going to the funeral of like a parent. That's inherently traumatic. Nobody can go to those things and do it and like somehow or another be perfectly grounded. That nobody would ask that. And on the other side of it, I grew up in evangelicalism, Danielle, and
Mhm.
I was part of like that type of Christianity, which eventually became Christian nationalism. And you know what people always said to me back then? They would just like get this bizarre look on their faces and talk about how excited they were for getting to heaven and how excited they were about the possible rapture. And any day now, right? Any day now, it's going to end. And people just getting this bizarre reaction to it, just overcome with jubilation. What happened when Kirk died? We saw one AI slop video after another of him galloping off to heaven after he was brutally murdered. People saying, "Oh my God, we're missing him, but we're so glad that he's in a better place." You know what that shows, Danielle? Do you
Mm.
know what happens when someone starts wishing for those things? It says that something is wrong in the here and now.
Mhm.
It says that something is going on in this environment that people are wishing for it. And you have people and by the way, like you talked about Gaza. One of the reasons, and it's not the only reason, there are tons of reasons why that bullshit has happened in Gaza. One of the reasons is because there is a cult in this country that believes that Israel is the only way the
Yes.
world will end and that their own suffering will end and that they'll be welcomed into an afterlife. Do you know why evangelical Christianity and the idea of an afterlife became so popular? It's because peasantry under feudalism was so awful that they were told if they behaved, they would have a better life. That's what enslaved people were told as well. That's why it held so much power. We are dealing with people who are unhappy. We are wishing for these things. And what are they? They're warning signs. If you are wishing for leaving, then it says something about where you are now. And so we have to hold all these different things. And Danielle, that's asking a lot of us.
Yeah,
Ask us.
yeah, and I think about that, the rapture sentiment, the life will be better on this side. There's also, I don't know, Jared, there is like a naiveness about that as well, because you're taking away the responsibility that you have to
Exactly.
make the here and now better,
100%. Yes.
right? Because if I am in La La Land wishing for the rapture, wishing to be taken away, fantasizing about this other place where there is going to be just nonstop jubilation, then I take no responsibility for making the here and now any better,
Done.
right? So that to me is why, because and I'll say this, I have never prayed or wanted a utopia, right? What I want, because a utopia is not, to me, the absence of friction.
Yep.
It's the ability to navigate friction, knowing that, right, this too shall pass, right? That when you have the skills and the ability, it is not to be absent of pain. It's to understand that pain is necessary in order for you to experience joy. Rain is necessary in order to experience sun, right? Like everything kind of serves its purpose and its balancing. And so to me, in order to live this afterlife, right, of this beauty, then wouldn't that require you to put in some work
Yep.
in the here and now?
Exactly.
So that's where I have always struggled with that type of religiosity. Because if in fact, like, I don't understand how white evangelical Christians are not the climate change crusaders. This is the earth that God
Well,
created. And so to me, to have this ideology that tells you that so then all you're meant to do is extract, 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 and not tend to,
yeah.
is wild to me. Because this is, according to you, this is what God has created. God did not create this for you to destroy it. I don't think that that was the purpose.
Well, that's dominion theory. And actually, you want to hear something funny about this? I didn't know this, even though I grew up in evangelicalism and I was swimming in it, because part of it, when I was like writing my last book, I realized, you know what? It's really weird. Dominion Christian theory, the idea that like God gave you the earth to use. You want to hear something weird, Danielle? That happened at the exact same time as the rise of capitalism. Isn't that weird? Isn't that weird that all of a sudden, as like, because like, say what you want about feudalism, it was about having what you needed to make it through the winter, right? Eventually, you have to get to the point where you need excess in order for profit and profit extraction. So all of a sudden, you use everything. And it comes down to this, by the way, to go off of what we're talking about. We're talking about the difference between two things, and this needs to be an anchoring thing. It's magical thinking and rational thinking.
Mhm.
For me, a utopia, it's not a perfect place because nothing is perfect. It can't possibly happen. There's a reason why dystopias or utopias gone wrong, right?
Yeah.
I'm talking about an end to artificial scarcity. I'm talking about taking away
Come on.
all of the things that hurt us and drive us away from being our best and making the world the best it possibly can be because a few people can't share what they have because they're so screwed up that they can't imagine possibly doing it. On the other side is magical thinking. And by the way, I've done magical thinking, you've done magical thinking, everyone watching this has done magical thinking. It's when life gets hard and you start coming up with scenarios that will fix the problem without you actually addressing the roots of the problem.
Mhm.
And in sometimes that is something like Elon Musk will get us to Mars, right? Like, oh my God, we're ruining the earth. Oh, I'm sure Elon Musk will create the technology that will get us to Mars. Oh, things are so fucked up. Oh, I assume AI will take care of it. Oh, America is in decline. Oh, don't worry, Donald Trump has made it great again. And watching something like his address of the UN, and I don't know how much of it you watched, him telling the assembled countries, your countries are going to hell and America is getting better.
We're in
That
the golden age,
we're at
Jared.
the
Did you not
golden.
know that?
Everybody knows we're not, but you know what cults run on? They run on saying, absolutely, you've told me the truth, and I know that it's not true, but I give myself over to you. What we have watched in the past few days, what have we seen? A Charlie Kirk memorial that was so repulsive and disgusting that no human being who isn't in the cult would look at it and say, oh my God, I don't want anything to do with this. We see an announcement that Tylenol is causing autism. Then all of a sudden, we see the UN address. We find this shooting today where they're obviously lying to us. People have a magical thinking that all of this stuff is real, even though deep down they know it's not. Because the root of magical thinking is a desperation to fix things without actually doing the work. And
Mhm.
they have given themselves over to it. We'll be raptured. God will provide for us. We'll get to Mars. Crypto will solve everything. Whatever it is, they are lost in magical thinking, and we have to root ourselves in logical thinking, which is saying, hey, this shit is fucking nuts. And we have to work for this thing over here. That's the anchor that we're talking about.
And I forget who it is. Oh God, it is a father, and he calls it what America suffers from is the cult of innocence.
Hmm.
America suffers from the cult of innocence where they believe, right, that like they're not bad, everything is good, everything is fine. And so they need the magical thinking, right? Because without it, then, like I have said, white America would be forced to look in the mirror, right? Without the magical thinking,
Yep.
without the American exceptionalism, without our forefathers are these great people and all of these things, without that, you would be forced to look in the mirror.
Yes.
And so this is where the deep projection comes. You
Yep.
got to accuse and point at everyone else because you refuse to look in the mirror. And like I have said many times, because if they do, they'll shatter it and throw the shards at everyone else. So it is, we are dealing with, and I think that where we find ourselves so frustrated and then devastated is that trying to convince people that have cloaked themselves in biblical thinking of reality is like almost like a fool's errand, right? Like we're never going to convince this 40% of the population that like the rapture isn't coming on Tuesday at 12 p.m., right? That, you bear responsibility for how the planet, how the country is going right now, and just resting on your laurels, waiting for this rapture to come and take you up, right? You are contributing to the problem and you're obfuscating your responsibility, right? To do something about it, to take control over your life. Oh, it's God's will, right? So, which means that then I have no control over what is happening. It's already written, right? Like all of these things, they kind of write themselves. And so I feel like where we find ourselves, and at least what causes my waves of depression, is when I'm just like, I don't know who I'm talking to because I'm not quite sure if 40% is gone and 60% remains, but 60% is also still locked in this cult of innocence, where when I call out white nationalism and call out white domestic terrorism and fascism, that I still have to slow down because I got white people in my comment section saying, but not me, not me, not me, right? Like, okay, do you want a gold star for not being a bastard? Like, must I stop class in order to do that? Right? Like, or how do we actually move forward without the coddling? So it's like, I get into my own feelings of, so they're revealing, we know who they are. The hoods are off. The veil has been lifted. The dam is broken open. So what how do we convince the 60% that waiting for utopia is not where we need to be putting our energy in right now? And that we all have got to get our hands dirty, because all of us, again, I say this, if 1,200 men can go missing, anyone can.
Anyone can. And I want to do something because you just brought up a really important thing, and I think there's something to drill down on here. But again, I like to sort of demonstrate, like, because we're talking about this, you know, we have a public audience, thousands will watch this. Danielle, in your life, have you had periods of time where you engaged in magical thinking despite evidence to the contrary?
Yes.
Me too. Like a lot of my life before I began healing, I lived in that. What's happening right now? People want to paint this broad brush on everything. I do interviews sometimes, and somebody will say, "Do you think Donald Trump believes what he says?" And I say, sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't. He's living in a fluctuated state. He's lied to himself for so long. Somebody asked me, I was doing like this consulting thing. They asked me, "Do you think Alex Jones believes what he says?" Sometimes he does, sometimes he doesn't. And he did it for so long that eventually at some point you don't know who you are. You don't know why you say the things that you do. You just end up saying them, and you sort of live your life in a way in which, like, you find yourself in front of a microphone suddenly telling everybody that Tylenol causes autism. You can't even pronounce acetaminophen. You don't know anything, but you're telling people that you are so much smarter than them and the experts and all of that. Here's the thing. We are all on that spectrum
Yeah.
somewhere. We are all trying, like, some of us are more awake and we're like dealing with that magical thinking, and we're trying to figure out what's real, what's not, what is actually happening. Then you look at somebody like Ezra Klein, right?
Ugh.
And I want to tell people what's going on with Ezra Klein because I just see it constantly. They're like, "What happened to Ezra Klein?" What happened with Ezra Klein is that he is extremely famous. On top of that, he has the ear of every centrist Democrat. And then at some point or another, people realized, the Koch brothers and other right wing billionaire donors, that he would be a useful person to present their plan to make the Democratic Party the Republican Party. And by the way, I don't think he knows that. I don't think he understands that he's doing that. He's gotten so far down the line that he can't tell the difference between what's real, what's not, and what's magical thinking. And it's leading a bunch of people over here. Same thing with Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, you name it. Everybody is on a sliding scale of trying to figure this out. And so it goes back to what we've been talking about today, Danielle. We are in a world right now that is not just abusive through fascism. We are in a world in which lies have been weaponized. We are constantly being abused. We're being lied to. Reality is being twisted. And what's that make it easier to do if we're not careful? It makes it easier for us to fall into magical thinking.
Yeah.
You have to be aware of it to resist it. You have to see
Yes.
where it's at. And that, again, takes a lot of energy. But you have to not look around. Like, authoritarian regimes don't just happen. You don't just end up at Nuremberg looking at all the lights and you're like, "Oh my God, here I am. I should probably throw up a salute." You are boiled. You're boiled over days and weeks and months and years. And what you just brought up earlier about the 1,200 people missing, that should be a full-blown, massive scandal to the point where Donald Trump shouldn't be president of the United States anymore and should go to jail. And everybody associated, well, that's not happening. It's not even getting covered. It's not even being discussed. So we have to hold on to, this is how the world should be. Here's how it is. What do we do to rectify that? As opposed to falling into the magical thinking that other people are completely and utterly lost in.
Here's a question that I have for you, though, with regard to magical thinking, because there is sometimes when I do feel that it's necessary.
Yes,
So, for one thing, I believe that we can find our way out of this,
absolutely.
and that we can fight our way out of this. We can find our way out of this. That to a certain extent, Donald Trump and this regime were absolutely necessary to unveil to us the ineptitude of the Democratic Party, the complicity of the Democratic Party, the sociopathic tendencies of the Republican Party, the fact that two-party rule actually doesn't work, right? Um, and the belief that if a small group of slave-holding men could sit down with bourbon and a pen and conjure up over the course of days and weeks this idea called democracy and create this new republic, why can't we do the same? And that is my magical thinking at this moment, that there wasn't anything that was so amazing about those men that isn't amazing about people now. We have more technology, more information, more examples to work off of, more things to pull from in other countries and cultures, right? That work and don't work to create something new. So for me, that is the form of magical thinking that I actually hold on to that I think is strategic. Because if I don't believe that we have the ability to change, then what the fuck is this all for? Right? So you have to, I think, what we are saying here today is that you have to be grounded and conscious of the ways that information is being used to distort and to manipulate you, right? But we know that because of the aggressive influences around us, that we're not going to be grounded and clear-eyed
Yep.
all the time, right? But we need to be aware of what is working against us and what is working for us, right? So there's a level of consciousness that you really need to practice on a regular basis. It's not just one and done. So that's one thing. And then the other is, in order to be able to really survive we're dealing with, what we're up against, is that you need a form of strategic wishful thinking, the
Yep.
ability to imagine anew. Because if you just exist inside of the reality of what is, it will press you all the way down and rob you of the energy and the ability to conjure what it is you want and what it is you believe we need.
And by the way, it comes down to one word, which is hope, which, actually has become a really nasty word now because all of the indicators are that we shouldn't have hope, that we should just give up. It's awful. We should do this. We should do that. But you know what? Actually, it is. It's this moderation and groundedness that we've been discussing, which is this: you have to be able to believe that you're capable of doing something. And by the way, people will tell you no. You'll get rejected, you'll hit roadblocks, things will happen. And whether it's organizing or trying to create something, trying to be an artist, trying to change the world, there is an audacity to that. To borrow, I think, by the way, one of Barack Obama's greatest achievements was actually the coining of the phrase, the audacity of hope.
Yes.
And by the way, I think also Obama can be a little bit of a cautionary tale. Nobody thought that Barack Obama was going to be president of the United States of America. Nobody thought that people didn't think it was time for him to do it. Nobody thought that he was going to beat Hillary Clinton. Nobody thought that a black man could be president of the United States of America. He fought through that because he believed in himself. The cautionary tale is that he became president of the United States of America for a variety of reasons. What he wanted to do didn't happen, but he also got in his own way. And if you actually pay attention to his memoirs, I find them fascinating because it is a person more or less trying to wrestle with how they tried to change a system and the system changed them.
Yep.
And if you take a look at that, it is a cautionary tale that tells us we have to have hope that others will tell us is unfounded. We have to believe in ourselves, but believe in ourselves in a healthy way, right? To know our own worth, which is what our society tries to tell us that we don't have. It is trying to be beaten out of us with the soul murder that I've been talking about.
Mm-hmm.
We're not supposed to believe in a better future. We're not supposed to believe that we can have anything better than surviving this moment, and even that might be in question.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to engage with it as we build something. That something seems impossible until it's inevitable. We have to be able to be grounded and aware as it goes to say, oh, what's happened? Have I been unrealistic? Is this, am I being like arrogant? Am I
Mm-hmm.
like out of control with this thing? And you have to be able to be adaptable as that thing happens. And I'll say this: You have something like the progressive movement in the early 20th century that basically created so much change. They created like a democratic, sort of push. You then have everything from the civil rights movement to the feminist movement to the gay rights movement. Every single one of those groups was told it was impossible to change anything.
Yep.
And they were killed, they were hurt, they were harassed, everything tried to push against them, and each of them found the energy within themselves to hope and dream about a better world, and then they were able to fight for it. And that's what we face now. And we have to learn from that, and we have to learn from the cautionary tales and the inspirational tales all at once.
And also the fact that this is not going to have a neat
No.
and clean and wrapped up ending, right? Like there's this belief that, there's a right way to protest and there's a right way to resist. And you listen to how mainstream corporate media, you know, uh, uh, demonizes, right? Those resistors, demonizes those who, oh, look. And I watched in the way that they have totally tried to co opt what the Italians did this week and try and say, well, look at the damage and look at the violence and this, that. The world is violent. There is very few places and spaces that we can point to and say that resistance was clean and neat and people did not die and blood was not shed and tears were not shed. Where? Right? Like the world is violent because humans are violent,
Yeah.
right? And sometimes the pushback to that isn't going to look neat and tidy. And so I also think that we need to release that, right? And not fall for the narrative that is conjured around the quote unquote right ways to resist in this moment.
I want to say two things before we get ready to wrap this up because, I find it very fascinating that our conversations often lead into the next conversation or a conversation down the road. I'm just going to make a little bit of a prediction. There is going to be an episode of this in the near future in which you and I are going to talk about the legitimacy of violence. And that we are going to have a conversation about how something is being covered by our media and by our political class in which they are trying to say that something was wrong, and we have to talk about how circumstances have changed. And I say that to prepare people. I've tried really hard to talk about that because you can't, because of a bunch of different reasons. But eventually, at some point or another, we're going to have that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to have that conversation because at some point or another, things shift and change. And all of a sudden, the paradigm that you thought, I told people, by the way, months ago when this administration was getting ready to start, you need to start being more comfortable with the words criminal and terrorist not meaning the things that you used to think that
Yep.
they. And so as that stuff shifts, the only thing that we can do, Danielle, in order to meet very hard conversations and very difficult conversations, and we're going to have to leave behind a lot of things that we used to think, the only way that we can approach it is by being grounded.
Mm-hmm.
If we're being activated, if we're being reactionary, you're going to find yourself acting in an activated reactionary way. And you have to have as clear eyes as possible. And one last thing I'll say to leave people with a parting image.
Mm-hmm.
What you just said about this is not going to be easy or simple. It is not. There's going to be a lot of tragedy. There's going to be a lot of pain. And I want people to remember what we were told when Joe Biden was elected president in 2020. It's all over. Everything's fine. We
Mm-hmm.
won an election. We're going to make America better. The Republicans are going to wake up from a nightmare. Did it make people feel better? Yeah, it did. But learn from that. Somebody said in the comments, why does history repeat? We don't learn from it.
And we don't study it with any
We
type of yeah.
look at what has happened and look at where things are going. And this is not going to be simple. It's not going to be easy. And we're unfortunately going to have to take care of ourselves during some times where things happen that we didn't expect or that we weren't ready for. And this is one of those moments where we have to ground ourselves in the face of some really, really awful things.
And awful things about who we've believed this country to be, who we have been indoctrinated to believe that we are as Americans, right? These things don't happen here. And that comes from the erasure of history and the intellectual dishonesty that we have when putting a critical eye on our past as a way to make sense of our future. But the fact is that when we learn of the horrific things from this regime, things that have been done, when we finally grapple with that, you will begin to understand they weren't the first ones.
Can I say something on that very quickly? Because I'm so glad that you brought this up. Danielle, you know what's interesting? All popular dystopian fiction and franchises and all of that, have you ever noticed that they're just imagining like what happened to enslaved black people happening to white people? You ever
Yeah.
notice that? You ever notice that all apocalyptic fiction is actually people in America having to live under the conditions that are taking place in the supposed second and third world?
Hmm.
You don't have to imagine this shit. They have already shown us who they were. They enslaved millions upon millions of people. They raped them. They hurt them. They punished them. They murdered them. They used them for their purposes of labor.
And then disposed of them.
Disposed of them. You don't have to imagine these things. Everything that is happening now has a precursor. It's happening
Come
now
on.
with new technology and new circumstances. And now it's coming for all of us. But you need to understand, like what you just said, if you actually see where things have been, you can see where it's going. And you can't
Hmm.
deny it.
Oh, my friend, I thank you so very much for
Thank you.
these conversations and the opportunity for us to really get grounded, really understand what we're up against, right? And really understand the energy that is required in order to keep pressing forward. That's why we have these conversations. That's why I think that they're so incredibly important.
Well, I am so appreciative of you. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. These are hard things.
Very
These,
hard.
these are not hard things, but I hope from this that people are able to find some sort of grounding because it is bewildering and tiring. But we have to anchor ourselves and we have to give ourselves credit. We have to give ourselves grace. And I hope people will find that. All right, friend.
Until next week.
I'll see you next week. Bye, everyone.